that I've provided the committee indicates that it's a big question mark for FY11. Will we get the same amount, more or less, for FY11? My personal feeling is that because we're going to use this money to offset the decrease in Chapter 70 money for FY09, that there will be a reduction in available funds from this federal stimulus money particularly for North Reading for FY11, which leads me to conclude I would be very cautious in how I look at the stimulus money that has been targeted for North Reading for FY10. We should, in a wise way, be thinking about how we can put some of that money to offset some potential problems in FY11. And keep in mind that this is grant money, so this is not money that simply comes right into the budget. It must be accessed, it will be accessed by grant money, by grant application. And I don't believe will be commingled with the budget. So we need to really think this through. I haven't received yet what the drop in Chapter 70 money is. I do know that based on a session that I attended at Harvard Superintendent's Roundtable last week, that those cities and towns that were not brought to that were already at foundation level, were going to be receiving in FY10 $50 a student from the stimulus money. I believe that's off the table. And that shows you the impact for about 160 cities and towns where the stimulus money is going to be used to offset drops in Chapter 70 in '09. So that should send a very clear message to all of us that while the stimulus money will help out, we have to be very cautious and conservative in terms of how we think about it for FY10. And that's built into my recommendations. The second piece of stimulus money is called the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act. This is special ed money. This money, unlike the $853,000 being channeled to bring us to foundation level, the IDEA stimulus money is going into the Department of Ed and then out to local school districts. And that will be done by grant. Last Thursday, Carl Nelson, our business manager, Christine Danjo, our pupil personnel director, and Pam Bodwin attended a regional state meeting with the commissioner and the Department of Ed to talk about the application of the IDEA money. Now for North Reading, that totals $630,000, $640 something. $642,000. That money is over 2 years. We know right up front that that IDEA stimulus money is FY10 and FY11. Now, school districts had the opportunity to make application to get access to their IDEA money if they had a problem in FY09 special education. And we've decided in North Reading that it is not recommended. We've actually missed, the deadline is gone. We do not feel that we should be accessing that money for '09. We should distribute it over 10 and 11. And so on the recap sheet, you will see under the, down the bottom, under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, my recommendation for how to divide up at least the IDEA money. And I will also mention there is a smaller special ed funding. It's specifically for preschool, early childhood. And that amount is $12,495. So that's on top of the regular IDEA money. Now, based on the conference, the meeting that Carl and Chris and Pam went to last week, where the application has been reviewed, and I believe I included in committee material some of the details of that application, you can see very clearly that the Department of Ed will be directing how that IDEA money must be applied for and under what conditions. It's very specific. The two major categories for the IDEA funding would be recovery, or what is typically called maintenance of effort. 50% of the IDEA money may be used for recovery. The other 50% must be used for investment in programs and services to students in the special education area that after 2 years will not be available. Keep in mind, none of this will be available after 2 years, but that can lead to further growth in programs. And so it's considered to be a reinvestment. So if you think of the total amount of 642, you divide it over 2 years, about 320 per year, 010, and another 320 in 11, and then further break it down in terms of recovery and reinvestment. This is where I am recommending 160,000 be used for recovery purposes and 160,000 be used for reinvestment. So let me explain what I'm recommending for each portion. Under the recovery piece, I'm recommending through Chris Daggio that we use that money to 160,000 to offset the salaries of special education paraprofessionals. Now, just a caution here. Every time we use money, if we use this money to offset teacher salaries, then under the conditions of the grant, federal grant, 9% of that money is taken away as overhead federal cost. We never see it. It's just automatically taken off. So as you fill out the application, every time you use this money, if you were, say, going to use it to hire a teacher, then 9% of it would be deducted from the 160 and kept back in Washington. And so we're going to direct that toward the offsetting of paraprofessionals and therefore saving the, we don't need to do the 9% deduct, at least at this level. So that would mean that we can reduce the FY10. These are not new paraprofessionals. These are special ed paraprofessionals who are either inclusion or working in learning centers and resource room, but they must be targeted as special education. And then the second piece is for reinvestment. And this is the other 160,000. And what I'm recommending here, and I know that we've talked about this at the committee meeting, and that is to, we have been planning, Christina's been planning, to basically not take over a long-standing special education program at the middle school that has been under the control of the SEAM Special Education Collaborative. This is a separate program. We have children from a number of communities. We feel that it would be cost-effective to hire the teacher and the paraprofessional required to staff this program. In fact, I've actually hired the teacher. It's the same teacher who's been in the program, Mrs. Carter, who has been very successful in the program. But we're going to actually take this program on, and by doing that, we will not be paying tuitions to the SEAM Collaborative. And so we're going to actually be saving some money. And the balance then, the savings comes from the balance of not paying the tuitions. We pay a tuition per child to the SEAM Collaborative, but the cost of hiring the teacher, and there will be 2 paraprofessionals in the program, there'll actually be a slight savings. And so I'm recommending that we now should use the IDEA funding to offset the cost of that. And then the second piece will be to create a differentiated staffing position at the elementary level that will be used in a one-on-one setting. And so the net result is that we should be able to use $160,000 from IDEA investment, the reinvestment portion, for a total amount of the $320,000. And I've actually just rounded it off.
You have 332. Does that include the preschool money too?
Yes,
Okay.
It does include the preschool.
Okay.
And that's where the 332,495 comes from.
Okay.
And I will say that where it says under the pre-K IDA money, we do not have the specific guidelines. The grant is not available. And I would be targeting, now that's again, $12,495 over 2 years. Right now, I'm recommending that it be targeted for FY10, but if the grant says it has to be split over 2 years, I may cut that in half and basically look at 6,200, 200 something. But the net result is I believe that we can reduce our level services budget by using the federal stimulus IDEA money, and I'm recommending $332,495.
And so that's what gets us to the $716,877 current budget gap.
Correct. Which brings us to that budget gap. So the question before us tonight is, how do you deal with that gap going into town meeting? My further recommendations would be as follows. Remember that we have untouched the $853,881 of the stabilization money. However, because we're not sure whether that is a 1 year or 2 year, I would split that into two pots of funding, 010 and 11. And then basically that would be $425,000 per year. However, given what I said in my long introduction about the Chapter 70 funding, that may drop. And again, using the same formula, 50% for recovery, 50% for investment. The guidelines have not been released for this portion of the funding. However, because the IDEA money guidelines are very clear, my sense is, everything that I've heard, is that the guidelines will follow the same protocol. And so I would recommend $200,000 out of that second federal stimulus money be used to close the gap further. So that would reduce the $716,877 to $516,877. And now we're really up for discussion in terms of how to deal with that. And I'm open to,
Sure. I actually, before we get to 2010, I guess I'm concerned about 2009 in that we'll have bills to pay before the end of the fiscal year. And if we don't get our full local aid payment, are we being guaranteed that we'll get the federal grant money to allow us to pay our bills before the end of the fiscal year?
I'll know a lot more Thursday. I'm attending a day-long conference in which we're supposed to be provided a lot more specificity on all the issues that the superintendent has raised today, including the procedures for the grant application, including the concerns about the strings and how they're attached to this money. So I'll know a lot more. But I do say this, though, there's been the word guarantee hasn't been used, but it's certainly been inferred that all communities will be held harmless in FY09. And the cherry sheet Chapter 70 monies will be reduced to the town, but that there